The polished obsidian floor of the Grand Council lecture chamber reflected the soft glow of the holographic star maps that lined the walls. Aboard the starbase Orion's crest, these projections served both as decoration and functional tools, currently displaying the hundreds of worlds under Council protection in shimmering blue light. Dr. Selin Thrax, senior xenopsychologist for the Galactic Council, watched as delegates from a dozen species filed into the chamber, their varied physiologies requiring everything from anti-gravity assistance to atmosphere modification bubbles. 20 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the galactic community. 20 years since Earth had learned it was not alone, and since the Council had discovered yet another sentient species to catalog, study, and integrate into its complex political ecosystem. Humans were hardly the most intimidating species the Council had encountered, ranking only mid-tier in raw military capability, technological advancement, and territorial expansion. The Zodarians, with their silicon-based biology and resistance to most conventional weapons, posed a far more obvious physical threat. The Gorvak, a hive-minded collective capable of coordinating attacks across light years instantaneously, had required special containment protocols for decades. Yet, here stood Selene, about to deliver what would undoubtedly become the most controversial lecture of her career. Behind her, encrypted data scrolled across her private display, evidence compiled over 5 years of meticulous research. She adjusted the neural interface at her temple, feeling the comforting tingle of her presentation syncing with her thoughts. Her blue, scaled fingers trembled slightly, the only outward sign of her inner tension. "Dr. Thrax," came a voice behind her, "the Council is ready for your briefing." Selene turned to face Counselor Eden, the ancient meridian whose 12 eyes blinked in asynchronous patterns across his cranial ridge. "Thank you, Counselor. I hope the Council is prepared for uncomfortable truths." Eden's breathing sacs pulsed, the meridian equivalent of a sigh. "They rarely are, Doctor, but proceed nonetheless." The chamber dimmed as Selene took her position at the central podium. The delegates fell silent, their attention focused on the slender Caitian scientist. Her species was known for analytical precision and emotional detachment, traits that had served her well in her research, but had made the conclusions she'd reached all the more disturbing. "Distinguished delegates of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice steady despite her apprehension. 20 years ago, we welcomed humans into our community with the standard protocols established for mid-tier warrior species. We implemented the usual safeguards: restricted technology transfer, limited access to Council archives, gradual integration into our trade networks. She paused, allowing her gaze to sweep across the assembled representatives. "I stand before you today to present evidence that our standard protocols have catastrophically failed to address the true threat humans pose to Council stability." A murmur swept through the chamber. A holographic display materialized above the central floor, showing comparative threat assessments of various species. The Zodarian Index glowed red at 89.7, the Gorvak at 92.3. Humanity's modest 54.2 rating sparked confused glances among the delegates. "As you can see," continued Selene, "humans rank only as a moderate military concern. However," her neural interface pulsed, and the display shifted dramatically. A new metric appeared, labeled Psychological Assimilation Index, with humanity's rating blinking at an alarming 97.8. Higher than any species in Council records. "This," she said, pointing to the glowing number, "is why I have requested this emergency session." The murmuring grew louder. From the junior delegates' section, a young Zarian rose to her feet. Her translucent exoskeleton caught the light as she extended her primary appendages in the formal gesture of challenge. "Point of inquiry. Dr. Thrax," she said, her voice modulated through her species' vocalization membranes. "I am Voro, diplomatic attaché to Earth's North American Union. I fail to understand how humans, who are demonstrably weaker than Zodarians or Gorvak in every measurable metric, could possibly represent our greatest threat. Selene had expected resistance, particularly from those with direct human contact. An excellent question. Attaché Voro. Allow me to present case study number 1. The display shifted to personnel files and medical records of Ambassador Leah Martin, a veteran Phasian diplomat with over 80 years of distinguished service. Her record showed deployments to 17 first contact scenarios and successful negotiations of 32 interspecies conflicts. Ambassador Martin was assigned as our primary diplomatic liaison to Earth's United Governance 8 years ago. Selene explained. Her psychological assessments prior to deployment showed typical Phasian stoicism and unwavering loyalty to Council protocols. Medical scans appeared, showing brain activity patterns over a timeline. Within 6 months of regular contact with human cultural emissaries, Ambassador Martin began exhibiting concerning behavioral changes. She requested extensions to her Earth assignment 4 times. She began adopting human cultural practices not required for her diplomatic cover. She established a permanent residence in a region called New Zealand. Most alarmingly, when temporarily recalled for standard diplomatic rotation, she experienced symptoms consistent with severe withdrawal and emotional distress. Selene advanced to the final medical scan, showing drastically altered neural patterns. Ambassador Martin eventually submitted her resignation from Council service. She now lives permanently among humans and has refused all contact with her home world. The chamber erupted in concerned chatter. Voro remained standing, her exoskeleton now pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, indicating skepticism. One diplomatic defection hardly constitutes a crisis. Dr. Thrax, she countered. Ambassadors occasionally go native in many contexts. Indeed, Selene nodded, which is why I present case study number 2. The display shifted to security footage from a Council cultural exchange facility. The timestamp indicated a date 3 years ago. The footage showed a Zarian phase warrior, one of Voro's own species, genetically engineered for perfect loyalty to the hive mind, engaged in conversation with a human. The human appeared to be demonstrating some form of artistic expression, manipulating pigments on a physical medium. This is Zarian Security Specialist Cath-12, assigned to protect our cultural attachés. Selene explained. Zarians, as you know, experience identity as a collective consciousness, with individual units serving as extensions of the greater hive mind. The footage advanced, showing multiple encounters between the same Zarian and human over several months. After 14 encounters with this human artist, Cath-12 began producing unauthorized artistic creations during off-duty cycles. When questioned, she described experiencing individual inspiration, a concept previously unknown in Zarian psychology. Voro's bioluminescence dimmed noticeably. 3 months later, Selene continued, Cath-12 severed her connection to the Zarian hive mind, an action previously thought biologically impossible, and requested asylum on Earth. She now identifies by the name Catherine and lives among humans as an independent artist. The chamber fell silent. Even Voro seemed momentarily without response. Selene continued, her voice grave. These are not isolated incidents. Our covert operations have intercepted encrypted Council memos, forecasting mass attrition of specialists on Earth deployments. The defection rate has increased by 43% year over year since first contact. But more concerning than the numbers is the pattern. The display shifted again, showing a complex web of interconnected data points. Humans appear capable of forming deep psychological bonds with members of virtually any species, regardless of biological, cultural, or cognitive differences. More disturbingly, these bonds create what our research suggests is a form of psychological dependency in non-human species, a phenomenon I have termed empathic addiction. Another delegate rose, a Tholian whose crystalline form refracted the holographic light. Are you suggesting humans are deliberately weaponizing emotional connection, Dr. Thrax? That remains unclear, Selene admitted. We have no evidence of coordinated intent. However, the effect remains the same whether deliberate or inadvertent. Humans appear uniquely capable of offering a form of emotional connection that other species find difficult to resist and potentially impossible to recover from. Political tension immediately electrified the chamber as delegates began speaking over one another. The council's factions were already forming, those advocating for immediate remote-only diplomacy protocols versus those arguing for more surgical cultural exchange approaches. Councillor Eden raised his primary limbs, calling for order. Dr. Thrax, what specific threat does this empathic addiction pose to council security? Selen's expression darkened. Consider the implications. Councillor, we have already documented numerous cases of highly placed officials compromising council interests to maintain their connection to humans. We have evidence of classified technology transfers, intelligence leaks, and policy manipulations, all from individuals with previously unblemished service records. She activated a new display, showing a simulation of progressive influence spreading through council infrastructure. If this trend continues at current rates, within 15 years, humans will have compromised enough key positions to effectively control council policy through proxy agents, not through military conquest or technological superiority, but through what amounts to psychological colonization. The council chamber erupted into alarmed debate. Eden called repeatedly for order as various factions shouted competing proposals for containment and quarantine. Voro, who had remained standing throughout, finally spoke again. I request permission to present a counter-perspective. Councillor. Eden, perhaps eager for any voice of moderation, quickly granted it. Voro stepped to the center of the chamber, her exoskeleton now pulsing with the complex patterns that indicated formal discourse mode among Xerians. I acknowledge the concerning pattern Dr. Thrax has identified, she began. However, I propose we must distinguish between malignant exploitation and genuine cross-species connection. In my 3 years working alongside humans, I have observed their capacity for empathy can be both disruptive and beneficial. Beneficial how? Challenged a Gorvak representative, his multifaceted eyes reflecting suspicion. Diplomatic breakthroughs previously thought impossible, Voro explained. The Axiom Krellian peace accords were deadlocked for centuries until human negotiators facilitated a resolution by establishing emotional investment from both sides. The Tarsian plague would have decimated 3 sectors, if not for human medical volunteers who risked infection to establish trust with quarantined populations. Selen stepped forward. These apparent benefits do not outweigh the security risks. Perhaps, interrupted Voro, we should consider the possibility that what you term addiction might represent an evolution in interspecies relations rather than a threat. Their debate was cut short by an urgent communication that flashed across the chamber's main display. The Earth Diplomatic Summit, a gathering of council representatives on human territory scheduled for the following week, was requesting emergency security reinforcements. Intelligence suggested a possible sabotage attempt targeting the summit's communication and defensive systems. Councillor Edon turned to Selen. Dr. Thrax, given your expertise in this matter, I'm assigning you to lead our security response team. Your mandate is to assess the situation and implement appropriate countermeasures. Selen straightened, recognizing both the responsibility and the opportunity to gather more evidence. I accept, Counselor. Attaché Voro, Eden continued. Given your familiarity with Earth protocols, you will accompany Dr. Thrax as liaison. Voro's bioluminescence flickered in patterns suggesting surprise and concern, but she bowed in acceptance. As the emergency session disbanded, Selen found herself standing beside Voro in the corridor outside the chamber. I hope you understand, Attaché, Selen said quietly, that my research is not motivated by prejudice against humans, but by genuine concern for council stability. Voro's exoskeleton shifted in the subtle patterns that indicated thoughtfulness. And I hope you understand, Doctor, that some forms of stability may not be worth preserving if they prevent genuine connection between sentient beings. Selene had no immediate response to that. Instead, she simply nodded and said, "We depart for Earth in 6 hours. Be prepared." The journey to Earth aboard the Council diplomatic vessel Concordance gave Selene time to review security protocols and brief her team. The ship's quantum engines compressed the vast interstellar distance, but even so, the 2-day transit allowed for thorough preparation. Voro kept largely to herself during the journey, spending hours in communication with her contacts on Earth. Selene observed this with a mixture of professional concern and personal curiosity. Was the young Zarian's behavior evidence of the very phenomenon she had described to the Council, or merely diplomatic diligence? As they approached Earth orbit, Selene summoned Voro to the ship's tactical room for a final briefing. "The summit is being held in a region called Geneva," Selene explained, activating a holographic display of the location. "The humans have established a specialized diplomatic compound with accommodations for 17 different atmospheric requirements and 6 distinct gravitational zones." Voro nodded. "The compound was designed with significant input from Council architects. I was part of the oversight committee." "Then you're aware of the security vulnerabilities," Selene said, highlighting several areas of the compound. "Particularly the integrated shield systems that protect against both physical and information-based threats." "The shields are state-of-the-art," Voro countered. "A joint development between Meridian engineers and human cybersecurity experts." "And therein lies the problem," Selene said grimly. "Our intelligence suggests the sabotage threat specifically targets those integrated systems, using methods that could only have been developed by someone with intimate knowledge of both Meridian and human technologies." Understanding dawned in Voro's compound eyes. "You believe Council engineers have been compromised by human influence?" "The evidence points in that direction," Selene confirmed. "Which is why my team will be implementing independent security protocols upon arrival." Their ship docked at the orbital transfer station above Earth, where they boarded a specialized atmospheric shuttle for the descent to the surface. As they broke through the cloud layer, Selene found herself studying Earth's landscape with professional detachment, masking personal fascination. The varied topography, the vast bodies of water, the sprawling human settlements, all of it so different from her homeworld's carefully engineered environments. The diplomatic compound came into view, its crystalline domes and spiraling towers incorporating architectural elements from a dozen Council species in what Selene reluctantly acknowledged was an aesthetically harmonious whole. Surrounding the compound, the ancient human city spread outward, its mix of historical structures and modern developments telling the story of a species in constant evolution. Upon landing, they were greeted by a delegation that included both Council security personnel and human diplomatic staff. At the forefront stood a human female, her dark skin contrasting with the white formal attire that seemed to be standard for human diplomatic functions. "Dr. Thrax, Attaché Voro." The human greeted them with the formal hand gesture the Council had adopted for cross-species interactions. "I am Dr. Mira Ligari, Cultural Attaché and head of Earth's Xenopsychology Division. Welcome to Geneva." Selene performed the reciprocal gesture while conducting a rapid professional assessment. Dr. Ligari's demeanor was composed, her expression open but not excessively emotional. A calculated presentation, Selene suspected, designed to put non-human visitors at ease. "Thank you, Dr. Ligari," Selene replied. "We understand there are security concerns regarding the upcoming summit." Ligari nodded, her expression turning serious. "Yes, our cybersecurity team detected unusual activity in the Shield Harmonic subsystems 3 days ago. The intrusion pattern suggests familiarity with both Meridian encryption and human networking protocols. As we suspected, Selene, glanced at Voro. I'll need full access to your security grid and permission to implement additional countermeasures. Of course, Ligari agreed. We've prepared a dedicated operations center for your team. She hesitated, then added, If I may, Dr. Thrax, your reputation precedes you. Your recent presentation to the Council regarding human psychological influence has generated significant discussion among our own xenopsychologists. Selen's scales rippled slightly in surprise. You're aware of my research? Ligari smiled faintly. The Council may believe its internal deliberations are secure, but information has a way of finding receptive minds. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss your findings. Perhaps offer a perspective from the other side of your equations. That would be... Selen paused, realizing she was genuinely curious. Informative. As they moved through the compound toward the operations center, Selen observed the interactions between Council personnel and their human counterparts. What she saw did little to allay her concerns. Everywhere, she noted signs of the phenomenon she had documented. Council security officers engaged in casual conversation with humans, sharing jokes that required translation, yet somehow retained their humor. A Meridian engineer explaining a technical issue to a human colleague with unprecedented patience. A Tholian diplomat whose crystalline form had been adorned with what appeared to be human decorative elements. These were small things, perhaps insignificant in isolation. But to Selen's trained eye, they represented the early stages of the very infiltration she feared, cultural and psychological integration that inevitably led to compromised loyalties. In the operations center, Selen wasted no time establishing her authority. Her team, composed of specialists chosen specifically for their minimal prior contact with humans, began implementing the additional security protocols she had developed. Independent scanning systems, isolated from the main compound grid, were deployed to monitor for any unusual activity. Your measures seem quite thorough, observed Dr. Ligari, who had remained to assist with the integration of the new systems. The situation demands thoroughness, Selen replied without looking up from her work. May I ask a personal question, Dr. Thrax? Ligari said after a moment of silence. Selen finally turned to face the human. You may ask. I reserve the right not to answer. Fair enough, Ligari smiled. I'm curious. Have you had much direct interaction with humans prior to this assignment? My research has been conducted primarily through data analysis and field reports, Selen admitted. Direct contact has been limited and structured. I see. Ligari nodded thoughtfully. And yet you've developed such definitive conclusions about our psychological impact on other species? Selen felt a flash of defensiveness. The data speaks for itself. Dr. Ligari, the pattern of influence and subsequent loyalty shifts is statistically undeniable. I don't dispute your data, Ligari said carefully. Only perhaps your interpretation of it, what you characterize as addiction, might be better understood as genuine connection. The discovery of common ground despite biological differences. A comforting interpretation, Selen replied, but one that ignores the security implications. Does it? Ligari challenged gently. Or does it simply suggest that security might be better achieved through mutual understanding than through isolation and suspicion? Before Selen could respond, an alert sounded from one of the monitoring stations. A security specialist, a Gorvak whose multiple eyes allowed simultaneous monitoring of several screens, signaled for her attention. Dr. Thrax, the specialist reported. We've detected anomalous code sequences in the shield harmonics control node. The pattern matches the suspected intrusion signature. Selen moved quickly to the station, analyzing the data streams. Isolate the affected subsystems immediately. Prepare containment protocols. Doctor, the specialist hesitated, compound eyes blinking in confusion. The code appears to be dormant. It's not executing any functions, merely waiting. A time trigger, Selen concluded. Set to activate during the summit when the shields will be at full capacity. She turned to Ligari. When does the main delegation arrive? Tomorrow morning, Ligari confirmed, her expression grave. 16 council representatives and their staffs, plus the human diplomatic corps. Then we have less than 24 hours to neutralize this threat, Selene said. Specialist, begin trace protocols. I want to know where this code originated and who implemented it. As her team worked through the night, Selene found herself increasingly troubled by the sophistication of the intrusion. The code was a seamless blend of meridian logical structures and human intuitive programming, a hybrid approach that would have required intimate collaboration between experts from both species. Voro joined her in the early hours of the morning, the Zarian's exoskeleton dim to its resting state. Any progress? We've isolated the trigger mechanism, Selene explained, displaying a complex code sequence. It's designed to create a cascading failure in the shield harmonics when all systems are brought to full capacity for the summit. The failure would create a 30-second window where all communications and defensive systems would be offline. Long enough for a coordinated physical attack, Voro observed. Precisely. Selene nodded. But we haven't been able to trace the origin. The code implementation was fragmented across multiple access points, some within the compound, others from external sources. An inside job with outside support, Voro's bioluminescence pulsed with concern. Yes, but the pattern is unusual. Selene highlighted sections of the code. See these structures? They don't match known terrorist or insurgent groups. The methodology is philosophical, almost. The code isn't just functional. It contains elements that appear to be making a statement. What kind of statement? That's what troubles me, Selene admitted. It appears to be advocating for unrestricted communication between species, the elimination of barriers to understanding, as one embedded comment puts it. Voro was silent for a moment, her compound eyes fixed on the code. Not an attack, then a demonstration. A dangerous one, Selene countered. Whatever the intent, the result would be a catastrophic security breach. Dr. Ligari entered the operations center, looking weary but determined. The delegates have begun arriving. We need to make a decision about the summit. Selene straightened, her decision already made. We implement countermeasures and proceed. Canceling would only delay the confrontation and alert the perpetrators that we've discovered their plan. Agreed, nodded Ligari. What do you need from us? Maintain the appearance of normal operations, Selene instructed. My team will deploy a shadow shield system that will activate the moment the primary shields fail. But we need to identify the perpetrators, which means allowing them to believe their plan is proceeding undetected. As the delegates arrived and the summit preparations continued, Selene positioned her team strategically throughout the compound. The shadow shield system, a Kashan technology unknown to most council species, and certainly to humans, was calibrated to respond within milliseconds of a primary shield failure. The summit's opening ceremony was scheduled for midday in the compound's central chamber, a vast space with a transparent dome that offered a view of Earth's sky. Delegates from 16 council worlds and human representatives from 12 Earth nations gathered in a display of interstellar diplomacy that would have been unimaginable just 20 years earlier. Selene observed from a monitoring station at the periphery of the chamber, her attention divided between the ceremony and the security system's data streaming across her neural interface. Beside her, Voro watched the proceedings with an intensity that suggested personal investment rather than mere professional duty. You care deeply about the success of this summit, Selene observed quietly. Voro's exoskeleton pulsed briefly in acknowledgement. I believe in the possibility of genuine cooperation between humans and the Council. Not domination, by either side, but partnership. A noble sentiment, Selene replied, but one that may not survive contact with reality. The ceremony began with formal addresses from council representatives and human diplomats. Dr. Ligari delivered a welcome speech that Selene noted was carefully calibrated to acknowledge cultural differences while emphasizing shared values, a masterful exercise in xenodiplomatic communication. As the final speaker concluded, and the assembled delegates rose for the ceremonial activation of the unity field, a symbolic energy pattern that would combine elements representing each participating world. Selene's neural interface flashed a warning. The dormant code in the shield systems had activated. Defensive positions. She subvocalized to her team through the secure channel. Breach imminent. Shadow systems on standby. The unity field began to form above the central platform. Streams of energy in different colors and patterns merging to create a complex, harmonious whole. At precisely that moment, when all eyes were fixed on the spectacle, Selene's monitors registered the cascade failure beginning in the primary shield systems. But something was wrong. The pattern of the failure didn't match their predictions. Instead of a complete collapse, the shields were reconfiguring, establishing new connection patterns between nodes that should have been incompatible. They're not destroying the shields, Selene realized with sudden clarity. They're reprogramming them. Before she could issue new orders, the unity field above the delegates transformed. Instead of the abstract energy pattern that had been planned, it resolved into a three-dimensional display of data, the complete neural mapping studies from Selene's own research. The chamber fell silent as delegates recognized the classified information being displayed for all to see. Then, overlaid on the data, appeared a simple message in the standardized council text. Connection is not contamination. Selene moved immediately, signaling her team to activate the shadow shields and secure the control systems. But even as they responded, a second breach occurred, this one targeting the compound's communication network. Suddenly, every display in the chamber began showing the same sequence, comparative brain scans of council species before and after sustained human contact. The scans that Selene had interpreted as evidence of dangerous dependency were now being presented alongside additional data she had never seen, showing increased neural complexity, enhanced creative problem-solving capacity, and expanded empathic response in the affected individuals. A new voice addressed the startled assembly through the compound's audio system. Distinguished delegates, we apologize for this unorthodox presentation. We are the Synthesis Collective, a group of council and human specialists who believe that the policy of restricted cultural exchange threatens to prevent the greatest opportunity for advancement our species have ever encountered. Selene frantically traced the transmission, discovering to her shock that it originated from multiple sources simultaneously, some within the compound, others from orbiting vessels, still others from locations across Earth. The coordination was impeccable. What you are seeing, the voice continued, is the complete data set from Dr. Thrax's research, including the portions that were omitted from her presentation to the Council. The neural changes she characterized as addiction represent something far more significant. The first true interspecies neural synchronization in documented history. Dr. Ligari stepped forward, her expression a mixture of concern and what appeared to be reluctant admiration. This breach of security is unacceptable, regardless of the message. Identify yourselves immediately. There was a pause, and then figures began to rise from among the delegates themselves. A Meridian counselor, 3 human diplomats, a Tholian engineer, and nearly a dozen others from various species. They moved to form a circle at the center of the chamber, directly beneath the still displaying data. We are the Synthesis Collective, the Meridian counselor announced, his 12 eyes blinking in the pattern that indicated absolute conviction. We represent those who have experienced the benefits of unrestricted cultural exchange and neural synchronization. Selene stepped forward, her professional detachment finally cracking under the weight of her outrage. You have compromised council security and violated diplomatic protocols. Whatever your intentions, your methods prove the very danger I warned against. Do they, Dr. Thrax? The question came from a new figure entering the circle, Ambassador Leah Martin, the Phasian diplomat whose defection had been Selen's first case study. Or do they simply demonstrate that when individuals truly understand one another, artificial boundaries become meaningless? Selen faced the ambassador, struggling to maintain her composure. You abandoned your duty to the council. A lifetime of service discarded for what? The emotional comfort offered by humans? Not comfort, Doctor, Martin replied calmly. Completion. For the first time in my 80 years of existence, I experienced what it means to be fully known and accepted by another consciousness, fundamentally different from my own. That is not addiction. It is evolution. The chamber erupted in conflicting reactions. Outrage from some delegates, thoughtful consideration from others, and, from a surprising number, expressions of recognition and agreement. Selen watched in growing alarm as dozens of delegates, both council and human, moved to join the circle forming at the center of the chamber. This is a coordinated insurrection, she subvocalized to her security team. Prepare containment protocols. But before she could issue the activation command, Voro stepped into her path. The Zarian's exoskeleton, now pulsing with the complex patterns that indicated a hive mind in conflict with itself. Wait, Dr. Thrax, Voro said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Before you act, you must understand what is really happening here. I understand perfectly, Selen replied tersely. A security breach years in the planning, utilizing compromised council personnel to undermine our entire diplomatic structure. No. Voro's compound eyes fixed on Selen with unsettling intensity. What you're witnessing is not subversion, but transformation. These individuals aren't defecting from their duties. They're expanding their understanding of what those duties encompass. Around them, the situation was deteriorating further. More delegates were joining the central group, while others were backing away in obvious alarm. Security personnel from both Council and Earth forces appeared confused about how to respond. Their chains of command suddenly unclear. Dr. Ligari approached, her expression grave. Dr. Thrax, I had no knowledge of this planned demonstration, but I understand the principle behind it. What you're seeing is not human manipulation of council species. It's the natural outcome of genuine connection across biological boundaries. You expect me to believe this spontaneous rejection of council authority is natural, Selen challenged. Not rejection, Ligari corrected. Evolution. The council was formed to facilitate cooperation between diverse species. These individuals are simply taking that cooperation to its logical conclusion. A level of understanding that transcends political structures. Selen looked around the chamber, seeing the crisis through new eyes. This wasn't a military coup or a terrorist attack. There was no violence, no coercion. Instead, she was witnessing dozens of individuals from different species making a choice, choosing connection over separation, shared understanding over isolationist security. And in that moment of clarity, a terrible realization struck her. They were not being forced to make this choice. They wanted it. Desperately. The hunger for this connection was written in their postures, their expressions, their very biochemistry. You are not defecting for ideology, she said softly. The truth finally clear to her. You are addicted to human connection. The words fell into a sudden silence that had descended on the chamber. The members of the Synthesis Collective looked at her not with anger or denial, but with something far more disturbing. Pity. Is a plant addicted to sunlight, Dr. Thrax? Asked Ambassador Martin gently. Is a living being addicted to oxygen? What you call addiction, we recognize as the discovery of something essential that was previously unknown to us. Before Selen could respond, her neural interface flashed with an emergency alert. The Council's executive security protocol had been activated. A fleet of enforcement vessels was being dispatched to Earth, with orders to extract all Council personnel immediately. The news spread quickly through the chamber as other delegates received similar notifications. The atmosphere shifted from philosophical confrontation to practical crisis in an instant. "They're implementing quarantine protocols," Selene announced, a hollow victory in her voice. "All Council contact with Earth will be suspended pending a full security review." She expected relief from those delegates who had opposed the Synthesis Collective. Perhaps even satisfaction at this vindication of her warnings. Instead, she saw expressions of dismay spreading across faces of all species. Dr. Ligari stepped forward, addressing the entire assembly. "This response will only exacerbate the situation. Forced separation will not diminish the connections that have formed. It will only drive them underground, making them more dangerous and less transparent." "She's right," Voro added, her exoskeleton now pulsing with determined patterns. "Dr. Thrax, you must help us find a better solution, one that acknowledges the reality of interspecies connection while addressing legitimate security concerns." Selene found herself at a crossroads, both professional and personal. Her research had predicted this crisis, but not her own response to it. She looked around the chamber, seeing not a security breach, but a complex tapestry of relationships that defied her analytical categories. "The enforcement fleet will arrive within 12 hours, she said finally. "That gives us limited time to formulate an alternative proposal to present to the Council." The Emergency Council session convened virtually, with holographic projections of senior councilors appearing in the Geneva compound's secure communication chamber. Selene stood at the center of the projection field, her formal report prepared, but her thoughts in unprecedented turmoil. "Dr. Thrax," began High Councilor Ziv, the ancient Tholian, whose crystalline form had guided Council policy for over a century. "Your preliminary report suggests a coordinated subversion of Council diplomatic protocols on an unprecedented scale. You recommend classifying humans as a Level 1 psychosocial hazard and implementing complete quarantine procedures." Selene hesitated, aware of the eyes, both physical and holographic, fixed upon her. Behind the Councilor's projections, she could see Voro and Dr. Ligari watching intently. "High Councilor," she began carefully, "my initial assessment was accurate regarding the pattern of influence humans exert on Council species. However, having witnessed the manifestation of this influence firsthand, I believe my interpretation of its nature requires reconsideration." A murmur ran through both the holographic councilors and the physical observers in the chamber. "Explain yourself, Doctor," demanded Councilor Eden, his 12 eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns that suggested deep concern. "The phenomenon I identified is real," Selene continued. "Sustained contact with humans does indeed create profound neural changes in members of Council species. These changes do lead to altered loyalties and priorities. However, characterizing this as merely a security threat overlooks a more complex reality." She activated a display showing the neural scan comparisons that the Synthesis Collective had revealed. "What we are observing is not simple psychological subversion, but a form of neural coevolution. The affected individuals show enhanced cognitive flexibility, increased empathic capacity, and improved creative problem-solving abilities. These are not symptoms of dependency. They are signs of growth. Growth that coincidentally undermines Council authority," noted Councilor Eden dryly. "It challenges established protocols," Selene acknowledged, "but does not necessarily threaten the Council's fundamental purpose of facilitating peaceful cooperation between diverse species. In fact, it may represent an evolution of that very mission." High Councilor Ziv's crystalline form refracted light, in patterns indicating deep thought. "You appear to have experienced a significant shift in perspective, Dr. Thrax. One might wonder if you yourself have been influenced. The implication was clear, and Selene felt a flash of both indignation and uncertainty. Had her judgment been compromised? She had maintained minimal direct contact with humans, but the events of the past days had undeniably affected her. "My analysis is based on observable evidence," she replied firmly. "And that evidence suggests our current approach to human integration requires recalibration, not rejection." From the back of the chamber, Voro stepped forward, her exoskeleton pulsing with the formal patterns that requested recognition. "The Council recognizes Attaché Voro," said High Counselor Ziv, with noticeable reluctance. "Distinguished counselors," Voro began. "As a Zarian, I represent a species whose identity is fundamentally collective. Yet my experiences with humans have not diminished my connection to my hive mind, but rather expanded my understanding of what connection can encompass." She gestured to the neural scans still displayed. "These patterns do not show the erasure of our original neural structures, but their enhancement through complementary human neural frameworks. This is not replacement, but synthesis." "A compelling argument," conceded Counselor Eden. "But it does not address the immediate security concerns. We have documented cases of classified information being shared, protocols being violated, and now this coordinated disruption of a diplomatic summit." Dr. Ligari stepped forward next, her expression composed but determined. "If I may address the Council as Earth's representative." After a moment of silent communication among the counselors, High Counselor Ziv nodded assent. "Honorable counselors," Ligari began, "humanity entered galactic society only 20 years ago, a mere instant in the time span of your civilizations. We have much to learn about interstellar diplomacy and security protocols. The actions taken by the Synthesis Collective, while disruptive, were motivated not by malice, but by a genuine belief that artificial barriers to understanding threaten both our societies." She moved to stand beside Selene, a gesture of solidarity that Selene found unexpectedly affecting. "Dr. Thrax's research has identified a real phenomenon, one that we humans did not anticipate and do not fully understand ourselves. But rather than responding with fear and isolation, I propose we investigate this capacity for cross-species connection as a potential asset, rather than merely a threat." The council chamber fell silent as the holographic counselors communicated through their secure channel, their expressions unreadable to those physically present. Finally, High Counselor Ziv spoke. "The Council will require time to deliberate on this matter. In the interim, the enforcement fleet will proceed to Earth as planned, but their orders are modified. They will secure Council personnel and facilities, but will not implement full quarantine protocols until a final decision is reached." The holographic projections flickered and disappeared, leaving the chamber in sudden silence. "A temporary reprieve," noted Dr. Ligari, "but not a resolution." "It's more than I expected," admitted Selene. "The Council rarely reconsiders security determinations once initiated." Voro's exoskeleton pulsed with cautious optimism. "Then we have an opportunity to influence their final decision. But how?" Selene considered the question carefully. "We need to demonstrate that cross-species neural synchronization can be beneficial without compromising security. We need evidence that the process can be understood, regulated, and integrated into existing protocols." "A controlled study," Ligari nodded thoughtfully. "But there's no time to design and implement proper research parameters before the enforcement fleet arrives. Then we use what we have." Selene decided. The Synthesis Collective members who revealed themselves, they represent the most extensive examples of this phenomenon. If we can document their experiences systematically, quantify the changes they've undergone, they would need to submit to extensive neural mapping, Voro pointed out. Given the Council's current stance, that could put them at risk of being classified as security compromises. "I believe they would consider it worth the risk," Ligari said. They've already demonstrated their willingness to face consequences for their beliefs. As the enforcement fleet approached Earth orbit, Selene led a rapid response team to document and analyze the neural patterns of volunteers from the Synthesis Collective. Working with minimal rest, she compiled a comprehensive report detailing not only the changes these individuals had experienced, but also the specific benefits those changes had produced: diplomatic breakthroughs, technological innovations, cultural exchanges that had enhanced both human and council societies. The council deliberations continued for 3 tense days. During this time, the enforcement vessels maintained position in Earth orbit, their presence a constant reminder of the precarious balance between connection and conflict. On the 4th day, the council issued Directive 1139, a compromise that satisfied neither those advocating for unrestricted exchange nor those demanding complete isolation. Under the new protocol, all direct human contact with council species would be relegated to specially trained intermediaries, using automated avatars and AI simulacra as buffers. Physical meetings would require special authorization and would be strictly time-limited to prevent the neural synchronization process from advancing beyond reversible stages. Selene received the directive in her temporary quarters at the Geneva compound, reading it with a growing sense of hollowness. The council had acknowledged her research while implementing a solution that addressed only its dangers, not its possibilities. A gentle chime announced a visitor. Selene opened the door to find Voro waiting, the Zarian's exoskeleton dim to its most subdued patterns. "You've seen the directive," Voro said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Selene confirmed, stepping aside to allow Voro to enter. A predictable response, in retrospect. The Council rarely embraces transformation when containment remains an option. Many will defy it, Voro noted, settling into the room's adjustable seating area. The connections already formed are too significant to abandon because of policy. "I know," Selene nodded, feeling strangely tired. "We've essentially criminalized genuine friendship across species boundaries. The underground networks will only grow more sophisticated, more determined, and more dangerous," added Voro. "Driven into secrecy, the very connections that might have enhanced our societies will now become sources of division and potential conflict." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. "What will you do now, Dr. Thrax?" Voro finally asked. "Return to your research?" Selene considered the question carefully. "My work has been both validated and repurposed in ways I never intended. I identified a phenomenon of profound significance, only to see it classified as a threat to be contained, rather than a possibility to be explored." She moved to the room's viewport, looking out at the Earth landscape beyond the compound. "I will complete my report to the Council, the full report, including all the data the Synthesis Collective revealed. What happens after that?" She left the thought unfinished. "And you, Attaché Voro, will you maintain your position on Earth under these new restrictions?" Voro's exoskeleton rippled in what Selene had come to recognize as the Zarian expression of deep internal conflict. "I must consider my obligations to my hive mind, which still values the diplomatic relationship with humans, despite these new limitations. But I also," she hesitated, "I also have formed connections here that have become significant to me as an individual, a concept my species rarely acknowledges." "The very dilemma the directive seeks to prevent," Selene observed. "Yet fails to understand," Voro completed the thought. Later that evening, Selene sat alone in her quarters, recording her final report. Her neural interface captured her thoughts as she articulated the most difficult professional assessment of her career. "In conclusion," she dictated, "while Directive 1139 addresses the immediate security concerns identified in my initial research, it fails to recognize the transformative potential of human council neural synchronization. By weaponizing connection itself, turning a natural process of interspecies understanding into a regulated, restricted activity. We risk creating precisely the underground resistance movement we fear. She paused, considering whether to include her personal reflections. Professional protocol suggested omitting them. Scientific integrity demanded their inclusion. As the primary researcher who identified this phenomenon, she continued, I bear responsibility for how my work has been applied. I identified a pattern without fully understanding its meaning. I classified as pathology what may be the next stage in our collective evolution. For this reason, I am recusing myself from further involvement in implementing Directive 1139 and requesting reassignment to fundamental xenopsychological research, where I hope to develop a more complete understanding of interspecies neural compatibility. She ended the recording and submitted it to the Council's secure database, knowing it would likely be classified and restricted. Another piece of knowledge deemed too dangerous for open discussion. On Earth, in a small apartment overlooking Lake Geneva, Dr. Mira Ligari watched the evening news broadcast, announcing the new restrictions on human council interactions. The reporter's tone was factual, but concerned, noting the potential impact on diplomatic relations, scientific collaboration, and cultural exchange programs that had flourished over the past 20 years. Ligari had spent the day fielding calls from colleagues, students, and friends, both human and non-human, all seeking guidance, reassurance, or simply a sympathetic ear. Many council personnel stationed on Earth were already receiving recall orders. Others were being reassigned to the new buffer roles, operating through technological intermediaries rather than direct contact. She switched off the broadcast and moved to her desk, where a secure communication terminal displayed a message from the Synthesis Collective. Connection finds a way, stand by. A simple phrase, yet laden with both promise and warning. The Council had made its decision, believing it had contained a threat. But Ligari knew better. The connections formed between humans and other species would not be severed by administrative directive. They would adapt, evolve, find new expressions, just as life itself always did when faced with obstacles. She composed a brief response. I stand ready. As she sent the message, Ligari reflected on the irony of the situation. The Galactic Council, in its effort to protect its member species from human influence, had inadvertently ensured that the very phenomenon it feared would become more resilient, more determined, and ultimately more transformative than if it had been allowed to develop openly. Genuine friendship had become a galactic crime, but crimes required criminals willing to accept the consequences of their actions. And across Earth and beyond, thousands of individuals, human and non-human alike, were making that choice, weighing connection against conformity, and finding the former worth any price the latter might demand. The true threat to the Galactic Council wasn't humans' capacity for forming deep bonds across species boundaries. It was the Council's inability to recognize that such bonds represented not contamination, but evolution, the next step in a journey that had begun when the first different species had looked at each other across the vastness of space and recognized not alien otherness, but kindred consciousness. That recognition, once experienced, could never be undone. Connection, once formed, could never be truly severed. It could only be denied, suppressed, driven underground, where, like all essential things denied expression, it would only grow stronger in the darkness.